My name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist, and welcome back to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first 2 novels, one the start of a series and one standalone. And on my channel, I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of all writing, and that's characters. And the heart of the characters is their psychology. So that's the angle I like to take with pretty much everything I talk about on my channel. So today I wanted to talk about a suggestion that Dal Cecil Runo left me, and that was the redemption arc. So those of you that have not been on my channel before, I like to take tropes or writing techniques and such, and I like to dig into like the psychology behind them. And Dal Cecil Runo brought up the redemption arc, and I think this is a really interesting one to dig into because one, it is very, very popular. I think most, if not all, stories as of late especially have a redemption arc of some kind. A lot of TV shows have redemption arcs. So I wanted to kind of talk about the psychology of that and whether or not that's actually a good thing. So first and foremost, what is a redemption arc? A redemption arc is essentially a character development where a person who is either a villain or an anti-hero goes through steps and becomes one of the quote-unquote good guys. So I think the redemption arc is interesting because it essentially involves a change in morality, which those of you who've been on my channel before know I love talking about morality because I think it's fascinating. But I do think there is some misconception with the redemption arc. So redemption in and of itself, if you're to actually look up the actual description of it, it means to have a debt paid, essentially. That's one definition of it. And I think what we have generally is we have 2 different ideas of what a redemption arc is. You have the person actually going through it, and then you have the other people that they interact with. So if we're going to address the first one, the person going through it, essentially what this is it's not necessarily paying a debt per se, but it's going through a philosophical change. It's where one of your morals has shifted. So for example, we'll use Zuko because that is a redemption arc that is done very well. So he essentially goes through a redemption arc where what he deems to be honorable and important shifts. His big thing has been bringing honor and getting honor from his father, the Fire Lord. But as he goes through his kind of essentially self-discovery, he sees how people are suffering under the Fire Nation, and he sees how he in some ways has contributed to it, and he makes the decision that that's not okay. He's going to change that. And this is really what usually happens when you have a character that goes on a redemption journey, is one of their morals that they have grown up with is suddenly no longer acceptable. Now this is usually done by having another character be introduced or a situation be introduced where they're suddenly made aware of consequences that they either weren't aware of at all, or the exact impact of it was not really clear to them, was not really an important point for them, and now it is. That is the most common that I see. And that is kind of how our morals do change, is we're introduced to a new idea. We're introduced to a consequence we weren't aware of, and it causes essentially conflict within us, usually between 1 or 2 major morals. So if you have a moral that, for example, let's say that you have a moral that the state is always right and it has authority, but then you also have a moral that innocent people should not be hurt, and then you come into a situation where you find out the state is doing that, it's hurting people, then your morals are in conflict, and so one has to be surrendered. And so usually whichever moral is most important is the one that stays, and the other one gets trashed or changed, or things like that. The other thing that can happen is if one of your morals is no longer useful. This one I don't see done as much. Good example, let's say that your character was totally okay with torturing people to get information. But now here comes a new technique where you can get information from people without torturing them. Well, in that case, then torturing people becomes obsolete. There's no reason to do it anymore. So that moral changes. I don't see that one done as much because there's not as much emotional impact, and that's really what the redemption arc is about, is the emotional impact. But then we have the path of how other people view this redemption arc. And I think that's really where some of this conflict comes in, because while the change of morality is what's happening with the person going through the redemption arc, a lot of times the people that they're going to interact with are the ones that demand a debt to be paid. So this person has done horrible things, and these other people understandably want justice for it. So in that sense, it becomes a conflict of, okay, this person has changed more morally, but according to the rest of your characters, they've not yet made amends. And that's kind of the sticky point. Forgiveness is the last step because it's the optional step. Not everyone that goes through trauma or that kind of change has to forgive the person that put them through it. And I think that that's kind of the sticking point with these kind of redemption arcs, and I think is the main problem I have with a lot of redemption arcs, is that everybody forgives them. And I don't think that's realistic. Let me give you guys a modern day example. The She-Ra, the most recent She-Ra, Katra's arc. I actually don't have a problem with Katra's change in and of itself. I think it's actually done pretty well, because we see her backsliding. We see her having to make effort to change her behaviors and change the way she thinks, and I think that's great. I don't usually see that. The issue I have is at the end of the story, as far as we know, everyone that she has hurt in her past has forgiven her and welcomed her back into the fold. I don't think that is necessarily realistic. Because even if someone goes through a very strong cognitive emotional change, and they are definitely different than the person who caused that pain, the person who has gone through the pain because of them still hurts for it. And if they do not feel like they can be around this person, that is completely legit. That is completely understandable. And that's the big problem I have with these redemption arcs, is the fact that everybody forgives them. And I don't like that. Because if someone chooses not to forgive someone that caused them pain, that is totally their right. And even if this person has gone through a shift and has become a better person, they can't undo what they once did. They can strive to do better from now on, but they cannot undo it. And I think that's a consequence that we don't see enough with redemption arcs. The other thing, and those of you who have been on my channel before probably know where this is going, but I don't think everyone needs a redemption arc. They're very popular because, like I said, it does pack a strong emotional punch. But not every character needs to go through them. And I think sometimes characters go through them where it doesn't make sense for them to go through them. Because like I said, remember, what triggers a redemption arc is a choice in the character to change. And it has to be an internal change. You cannot, a person may say that they're changing for their family or their friends or whatever. But if it's going to be a long-lasting change, there has to be a change in here and in here. Otherwise, they will usually not maintain that change. Now, let's say that someone who has been drinking, for example, and gotten violent with his family decides that he wants to change because he doesn't want to be violent towards his family anymore. And that is the starting point. And that leads him to realize, well, then I need to stop the drinking. So his desire for his family can be the starting point, but he still has to make the change to give up the alcohol. You kind of see what I'm saying? So it has to be an internal change. And some characters just don't go through that. Some characters, when faced with consequences of their actions or of what's going on, sometimes they don't have a stronger moral that wins out. Sometimes having power or riches or whatnot is more important to them. And so they don't change because they don't see a reason to. And I think that's just as important, because while it's important to show that, yes, people can change and become better than the person they were, it's also important to show that it's a personal choice and not everybody's going to make that. I love villains that get redeemed. I also love villains that do not get redeemed and they stay villains because their morals are just twisted that way. And I think it's good to have a little bit of both, honestly. And I think as of late, there's just so much push for these redemption arcs because it's popular and people like it, that people don't stop to think about, should this person have a redemption arc? And I think that's something that needs to happen a little more often because, like I said, redemption arcs are great, but they are not universally, you can't apply them universally. Not everyone's going to go through one. So my thing is, consider the personality of the person you're going to put through a redemption arc and how big a change they're going to do. Because that's another thing that often happens is the person going through a redemption arc goes through a huge philosophical change and they don't struggle with it. That is not realistic. Even if it's something that they know they need to do and they really feel strongly about that, if they've grown up and been in a position prior where they've done these horrible things without issue, it's going to be very hard to stop doing that. They're going to backslide. And that's one reason I love Zuko's redemption arc so much, because he backslides. He falls. He fails. And I need to see that more of the redemption arcs. I need to see people that start on a redemption, fall back, backslide, and then push forward again. Because that's realistic. That's something that people struggle with. Like I mentioned with Katra's redemption arc. She has moments where she has to remind herself, here's this new behavior I'm trying to do. Here's these new tricks I'm trying. I need to remember to do them, because she starts to fall to her old reactions because that's what she's used to. Think about your brain kind of like a garden. So the behaviors that you've done for a long, long time are the most clear paths. They're the ones that don't have a lot of twigs or anything like that. So when you start a new behavior, you're creating a new pathway. But when it's a situation, especially an emotional situation, your brain wants to jump to the clear path because it's the easy one. It's the one it knows and understands. And so that's why it's a struggle to change behavior, because you have to catch yourself and direct yourself back to this path that is unfamiliar, still has roots and twigs and things you have to clear out. And it's hard. It's difficult. In psychology, we don't consider a behavior to be quote unquote changed unless you have held this new behavior for 6 months. And that's 6 months straight. Beyond that, you're working on it, and that's great, but it's not set. So that's my kind of beef with redemption arcs is they can be wonderful storytelling tools, but I think they're used too often. I think they're sometimes applied to characters where they should not apply, and I think the struggle of them isn't usually done very well. Usually it's, okay, this person has made a choice to change, and the focus is more on them winning the approval of the people they've hurt before, which, like I said, they may not ever win. Instead of focusing on how hard it is for them to make this cognitive shift. It's hard, it's difficult. And I want to see more of that, because I think there is so much room for good storytelling events in that arc that are being wasted, and I'd love to see more of it. So that was just me delving into the redemption arc a little bit. I hope you guys found it interesting, or at least learned something from it. As always, I will try to upload every Sunday, every Wednesday. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, make sure you leave them below. I will get to them as soon as I can. If you guys want to make sure you never miss when I upload, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you'll get a notification when any new videos go up. And until next time, I hope you guys stay safe and have a good one.